All right, thank you all so much for being here. I'm going to use my best teacher voice to welcome you. A little louder. Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Joanna Cattanach. I am proud to welcome you to House District 108. You are sitting in the last remaining Republican-held State House seat in Dallas. You are sitting in Deep Ellum, and we are so happy to have you here. A few housekeeping items when they turn off the margarita blender. They will be serving appetizers up in the top bar area in a few minutes. Feel free to come and get an appetizer. That's part of your welcome here. We have an open bar in the back that serves alcoholic beverages as well as coffee and tea. I hear that they are giving a free shot of tequila for every 10 years of service if you're a teacher. So some of you are going to need a ride home, I think. He Ubered. Restrooms are in the back. Make sure that you have signed in so that we can follow up. A few also housekeeping items. We are live streaming this event, so if you are on our campaign Facebook page, that's Joanna for Texas, people can watch there. We're also going to do it through the forum itself. We are also doing a standing video at the top that will be a full recording of what's happening today to share with the organizations that are here. I think it's really important to hold a forum that is public so that people can watch and comment and can have follow-up as well. So again, I am Joanna Cattanach. I am so happy to welcome you here, and since I have 10 years of service, I am going to go get my shot of free tequila for today. Thank you again so much, and I'm going to pass the mic to our other co-host, Christy Noble with the Funky East Dallas Democrats.
Thank you guys so much for being here. We are so excited to have this fabulous panel of really smart folks here. Keep drinking that tequila and you're going to get a lot smarter. Okay, I just want to tell you a little bit about the Funky East Dallas Democrats real quick. We are a group in East Dallas whose sole purpose is to increase the left-leaning voter turnout in East Dallas and beyond. We have a plan called the PUMP Plan, the Precinct United Mobilization Plan, that we implement, and we've seen great results in East Dallas over the last couple of years, getting people out to vote and getting folks involved, engaged, and educated in the democracy that we need to take back over for our own based on our values, right? So that's what we're all about. If you are not from East Dallas, want to talk to us about what we're doing, want to partner with us with what we're doing, we are open to that. We want to work with everybody that we can to spread the message. We've been going around kind of like Chris Tackett, and the evangelicals got nothing on us, I want to tell you. All right. Got so excited. All right, I got one more thing to show you. I think I put it in my pocket. Here it is. So the other thing that we do is we try to build community and make sure that people know that there are other Democrats, other people who think like them. Because before 2016 and everything started happening, people were afraid to be out of the closet and be a Democrat, right? It was easier for me to come out as being gay than it was to come out as being a Democrat in Texas, all right? So we need to get all of the Democrats out of the closet, and the only way we can do that is to show them that there are other Democrats, other people who think like us, right in their neighborhood, in their family, in their workplace, in their school, at their grocery store, all those things. So one thing that we're doing, if you're in East Dallas or anywhere around, we have these Funky East Dallas Democrat magnets. They go on your car, all right? And when you see somebody who has a Funky East Dallas Democrat magnet at the grocery store, at the haircut, or wherever, the dog store, then what you do is you go over to it, you take it off, you turn it over, and you put it back on their car, right? So they know that another Democrat, somebody who thinks like them, saw them, did it, and you can put it in on our Facebook page. You guys, something as little as that, recognizing that there are people, we're all over Dallas now because you guys are going to see these now that you know what they look like. If you want one, they're $10 up there. And again, I want to say thank you to Kira Becker from the Woodlands in Houston for organizing this. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to Café, Salsera, right? Is that how you say it? And all the people here who are here volunteering their time to make this happen. So they're doing this for free. Make sure you tip them. Make sure you give them some love, okay? And what's next, Joanna? Now we're going to pass it on to the panel. So you want to introduce the panelists?
All right. Head down to that end. Yeah, you could introduce the panel.
All right, got
This is
it.
the microphone.
Hey, Chris. We are good to go. Getting our microphones. I was impressed to hear her say that we're a smart group of people. I've got an impression here. I am the only person that was the top 20% of his high school graduating class. I had 5. Paint Rock, Texas. Anybody know where that is? It is over by San Angelo. We actually have the second largest collection of Indian pictographs in North America. If you'd like to come out, it's worth a trip. And so I've worn many hats. One of the hats I wear now is on the board of Pastors for Texas Children with Charlie Johnson. I went to Howard Payne, got a PhD in Christian ethics. 4.5 years I worked for Jim Hightower in Austin. For 22 years I fought the religious right in Texas. I was head of Texas Baptist Committed, and I would remind you as we start, the biggest threat to public education in Texas and America is still the religious right. Jerry Falwell once said, I look forward to the day there's not a single public school left in America. And that has been their agenda since the late 1970s when the moral majority was formed, and it continues to be their agenda to destroy public education. So you have a esteemed panel here tonight, this afternoon, and I'm going to introduce them to you and then kind of make some efforts at emceeing here. First person here is, you probably know Charlie Johnson. Charlie and I don't remember when we didn't know each other. He pastored in Lubbock, pastored in San Antonio, now in Fort Worth, and executive director of Pastors for Texas Children. Dr. David Vroonland from Mesquite ISD is with us. Troy Reynolds, the founder of Texans for Public Education, is with us. Mike Collier, who you know as not only a CPA, but the man who should be the lieutenant governor of our state. Rena, Honea, who is in some way kin to my wife, but we don't know it yet because my mother-in-law was a Honea, and there are not a lot of Honeas in the world, so she got to be kin to us somehow, some way. And finally, Chris Tackett, who I heard speak last Saturday, and I were together in Hillsboro speaking, and he's got a brilliant presentation on Empower Texans and the folks that are really trying to control our state government and destroy public education. So that's your panel. It's an extremely impressive panel, and we're going to have them discuss a few issues. And the first one, ladies and gentlemen, is an overview of school funding dilemma in Texas. First, let me thank the folks that put this together that spoke a while ago, our candidate and the head of the funky, we don't have funky dims in Paint Rock, but I'm glad they're up here in Dallas and doing well. We got to all work together. That's the whole key. Unfortunately, we don't have many Dems in Paint Rock, period, anymore. But as chairman of the Rural Democratic Caucus, the Rural Caucus for a certain party in this state, I'm working hard at getting that done. All right, what is the brief history of funding for our public schools in Texas? That's the first question. A brief history of the funding of our Texas public schools. We just did a deal in San Angelo Thursday night, The Truth About Local Taxes, and had our assistant school superintendent trying to explain the formulas and all that go into that. And you get lost real quick. So which one of you wants to tackle that first? The superintendent, the CPA, or who wants to handle it? Go.
I think I got mine.
You got one? Okay.
So I actually am going to touch on kind of its relevancy to today. The big driving issue, obviously, in our legislature today is compression of the property tax rate. And all of us would like our property taxes reduced. Obviously, I'm a taxpayer. I'd like to see mine reduced as well. The driving issue, though, in Texas public schools is that we are essentially reliant on those property taxes to function. And you hear this Robin Hood concept going around all the time that the wealthy districts having to pump money back into the system to help those districts who have less property value, and that's true. But it's also true, and this is something that most people don't understand, even if you are not a wealthy district, i.e. Mesquite, as my property values go up, and in Mesquite, Texas, the last 3 years, our property values have risen 10% each year. So my property taxpayer is paying more, right? But I'm getting basically the same amount of money because the state of Texas is reducing their contribution about the same amount that my taxpayer is increasing their contribution. And that the end result is I can't lower my tax rate even though I would like to be able to do that. I'm not in a position to be able to do that. That has been our situation for a long time. When I went and had a conversation with Senator West about my concern about property tax compression, it really centered around 2006. In 2006, we compressed the tax rate pretty substantially. It was 50 cents. You may not remember that. We went from $1.50 to $1 essentially. When we did that, the state said they would fulfill the difference. They would make us whole, if you will. That was the hold harmless provision that they put in place. The comptroller at the time, Grandma, if you remember her, she said, that's not going to work. It's not going to survive the system. By 2009, we were $5 billion in the hole. By 2009, 3 years. The only reason we didn't experience that hole in 2009 was because of Obama's stimulus money that filled that hole for that 2-year period. Yep. But in 2011, there was no more stimulus money, and the end result was we ended up firing a whole bunch of teachers. My concern with what's going on in the legislature right now is there's talk of adding $6 billion more into the system, which obviously I applaud. I want to see that, and I'd like to dedicate that a lot to increasing the pay of teachers. But the concern I have is you're increasing essentially the level of revenue that we're going to be receiving, so therefore we're going to spend that on our teachers. And then 2 years from now, if the hold harmless provision, which essentially we're just filling with the fund balance at the state level, the rainy day fund you all have heard about, if that money's not there, we've increased expenditures $6 billion. Somehow the state has got to make sure this time around that they hold their obligation. Because the failure to hold the obligation on this, if we compress the tax rate and that actually becomes true, is going to do significant harm to the system, not to mention to the individual teachers and employees within the district. I think that's something to pay attention to. I'll share my opinion about how we should do this later, but I wanted to kind of give you that brief background as it relates to today. We've got to start thinking about how we fund our system, not through property taxes, but through some other means.
Go ahead, Troy.
I'd like to add to that real quick and frame one thing that you're going to hear about several times today. There's a lot going on in Austin right now concerning compression of property taxes. There's a proposal for a sales to buy out M&O, basically take over that from the state. Understand this. House Bill 3 is a good first step. It is not school finance reform. They are not changing the structure where the state can no longer back out on its obligation. The state of Texas, by its own admission, and I think this number that I'm about to tell you is actually much lower, but by its own admission, the state only pays about 38% of public education. The rest of it's falling on you, the local taxpayer. In some of your districts, you're paying 100% of it, plus if it's recapture, you're paying somebody else's as well. The trap, if we don't have step 2 in the next legislature that forces the state to meet its constitutional obligation, is this. They will continue to back out. Your property taxes will briefly drop because of the infusion of new money, but then as inflation kicks in and as property appraisals go up and the state continues to back out, they will go back up again. And at that point, the privatization forces are going to say, you sorry administrators, we gave you all this money and we're right back where we started, and that's when the privatization movement really kicks in. That's the trap that's being set in school finance right now.
Okay. Charlie, you want to say a word?
Let me just jump in here. It's an honor to be with all of you. I rode here from Eastland County, where it is wet. Glad to be with Chris and Mike and Rena and Troy and Dave, my good friends, and my lifelong friend, David Curry, who is a great leader in Pastors for Texas Children. We rank about 45th in the country in per pupil spending. There are powerful forces that want to keep us there. We have on the Senate side a real now obstruction, as in the past 24 hours, double down on the part of Dan Patrick, who is the single greatest obstructionist, regressive force in Texas politics. Do I hear an amen? He needs to be retired, and anyone who goes with his program needs to be retired in 2020. Now some of those people are good people, or at least nice guys. But an old preacher, William Sloane Coffin, David, said a long time ago, there's a difference between a nice guy and a good man, a good woman. And Jesus said, by their fruits you will know them. Now, somebody talked about evangelicals a few minutes ago. I is one. I am an evangelical. I do believe in the good news. That's what the Greek word means, evangelion, gospel. I'm seeing my friend Eston Williams, Reverend Eston Williams over here, nodding his head. And we believe in the good news of God for all people. The reason we as faith leaders, as pastors and elders and deacons, church leaders, congregational leaders, got into this fight a little over 6 years ago is because the public school is the place where every single child is unconditionally accepted in our communities. And so they are centers of love, and we believe to incarnate that love, keep this shut. Preaching and praying belongs in the home and in the congregation, not in the local school. Keep these open. And so we have about 1,000 churches in our network that are coming into our schools with tangible assistance because the state of Texas is not providing Mesquite kids their constitutional obligation to make suitable provision for public free schools. Now, hot off the press is Dan Patrick doubling down on 2.5 that Superintendent Vroonland just talked about, and Paul Betancourt, his compatriot in this injustice. And so he's twisting arms. There is a possibility, however remote, that people will do the right thing. There is a possibility for a revolt against Dan Patrick in the Senate. It needs to happen. And I know I'm talking to Democrats, and I love Democrats. It is rural Republicans that have saved public education in Texas, y'all. Let's put our hands together for them. And if we can form this wonderful coalition, I'll pass the microphone, Reverend Curry. If we can form this wonderful coalition between urban Democrats like you and rural Republicans, and it's hard to find one on the Senate side, but Kel Seliger's one from Amarillo, and Robert Nichols is one. And by the way, we got a Democrat, Eddie Lucio, who's voting with Dan Patrick. And really, he doesn't like me. I won't put it that way. He's voting with Dan Patrick because he wants that money for his Catholic schools. He wants that voucher money that's privatization. And so he's consistently voting with Dan Patrick. So that's the way it shapes up. If Nathan Johnson, Beverly Powell, they're new, but they're getting their sea legs. They're doing well. If you know anybody in the valley, particularly Roman Catholic people, particularly the bishop, who can go to Eddie Lucio, so I'm just talking turkey, go to your Hispanic friends in the valley. Tell them to call the bishop. Lewis, am I saying this right? And call Senator Lucio and tell him to support public schools. Support public schools. And all we got to get is 16 Senate members. And we can get 16 Senate members. I believe we can. I wouldn't be sitting here if I didn't. Now, Larry Taylor, Jane Nelson, Joan Huffman, these are key Republican Senate members who can do the right thing. They can do the right thing. And nobody in this room is cynical. We wouldn't be here if we were. And we believe that we believe in the best in people until they prove it's otherwise. And the line is here, y'all. This is the line. There isn't any future. It's right now. And we've got to get our children the money that they deserve to receive the God-given gift of their education.
Mike, would you like to comment on school finance? Thank you, Charlie. You're always on the passionate side, my friend.
I'd rather listen to Pastor Johnson than speak. I'm gonna yield the balance of my time.
No way.
Well, first of all, thanks for letting me come and speak to you, and thanks very much for your help in this last campaign. We scared the hell out of them, didn't we? I hate to say that in front of preachers.
It's all right, brother.
But we didn't make them any smarter, and that's it. And that's the rub. So, I mean, if you really want to talk about the history of school finance, you got to go to 1836. Don't worry, David, this is not going to take 2 hours. But if you go back to 1836, which is when we declared our independence from Mexico and we listed the reasons why we were out of here, one of them was public education. That Mexico, the words are something along the lines of, despite Mexico's bountiful wealth, they refused to provide a system of public education for our children. So if you think about it, the state of Texas really was predicated upon public education excellence. And we had for many, many years a wonderful track record. Not only K through 12, but also the universities. And the state put the money in. And that's the heart of the problem, is the state's not putting the money in. Now, those of us that make our living, any accountants in the room? Financial people, hi. Those of us that make our living in the forecasting arena have an expression, dadgummit, I hate it when I'm right. And I'm afraid I'm right. And what I said, you know, when the legislature got together, I mean, they lost some seats in the House. Dan Patrick only got 51% of the vote. It was a real thunderclap back in November. Right. And so they charged into the session, and all they could talk about was public education. And I felt a great sense of triumph, didn't you? Right. That was very, very good, and I'm delighted. But I said, there's not going to be any money. The numbers don't work. The reason why the state is not putting money into public education and why they're setting a trap for you, as you guys pointed out, it's partly philosophical. We can deal with the philosophical aspects of this at the booth, but it's also financial. The state doesn't have enough money. They can't make ends meet. And I can quickly explain why, which will then very quickly lead to what we must do to solve the problem, which will then very quickly lead to what you can do when we're finished here and call your rep and your senator and tell them. The reason why the state can't make ends meet is because we made 3 crucial decisions over the years, and I'm going to walk you through it. In 1991, we froze the motor fuel tax to 20 cents a gallon, and because of inflation and fuel mileage, it's not producing enough money to maintain our highways, so that's got to come from the general funds of the state. Texas A&M Transportation Institute says that we're missing, it's a $4 billion a year structural deficit. That's money that's no longer available to schools. That was 1991. Then in 1997, we passed the Equal and Uniform Law, property tax law. Perhaps it was meant to protect us as homeowners. It does protect us as homeowners, but it created a huge opportunity for the owners of large commercial industrial properties to cheat the system and to underpay their taxes, and they do, and everybody knew about it, and everybody was talking about it. Back in 2004, the large appraisal districts in the state calculated that the owners of these properties are underpaying their taxes by $4 billion a year. And nothing's been done to fix that. Inflation would suggest we're missing $5 billion a year. That's $5 billion that's not available to public schools. And then the third decision was in 2006. This is when, because we were responding to a court order, and we did this compression of property taxes. So property taxes went down. Texans were mad then. Property taxes went down. Business taxes were supposed to go up. It was supposed to be revenue neutral is the term they use. And to achieve that, they threw out the old franchise tax, created a margin tax, and they botched it. Whether they did it on purpose or not, I don't know. But Carol Keaton, Rylander, Strayhorn, McClellan, who was comptroller, said that this tax is designed improperly, it will come up $5 billion a year short, and it did. And they have since reduced that tax, so now it's coming up more like $6 or $7 billion a year short. So now we're missing from our revenue streams 4 plus 5 plus 6. Who's good with numbers? 15 billion. But wait, there's more. Because when we're blowing holes in our revenue systems, basically shooting holes in the boat, we had to start borrowing money to make ends meet, and now we are drowning in debt. Have you heard them say that we always balance our books? We haven't balanced our books in decades. The state owes more than 50 billion. That's just debt, bonded indebtedness. Over 100 billion in unfunded pension. School districts owe a mountain of debt. The debt service at the state level is $2 billion. The debt service at school district level is $8 billion. That's another $10 billion of money that's not available for schools. So the point is the state doesn't have the money. There's another expression we have in accounting, which is the spirit might be willing, but the books just won't help us. So even if we did prevail upon them to change their point of view, and we need to keep after it, we still don't have money. And I said that the numbers wouldn't work. When they came out and said we're going to put in $7 billion, we're going to put in $9 billion, I said this won't work, the numbers won't work, and we now have the proof. We have the smoking gun because they have to raise sales taxes to try to make this work. And that won't pass. Texans will not tolerate raising the sales tax, and it's not just a penny, folks. It's 16%. They propose to take the sales tax from 6.25% to 7.25%, which means if you look at the sales taxes that you paid last year when you bought stuff like shoes and socks, that tax is going to go up 16% overnight, and Texans aren't going to tolerate that. So here's the bad news is we're going to be right back where we started. They're not going to close that loophole. I'm going to come back to that in a second. They're not going to raise the sales tax, which means they are not going to put the money into public education. When it's all said and done, when we get into the short strokes, I will be astonished if they still put that money into public education, because without those sources of revenue, where do you get an extra $9 billion for public education? I've looked at the numbers. You take it out of transportation infrastructure. You take it out of health and human services. They're cutting those budgets. They're not cutting them, let's be clear, I don't want to be guilty of hyperbole, but they're only increasing the budgets by 1 to 2%. Across a 2-year period, you've got to increase it about 8% to keep up with population and inflation. So the pain is going to be horrible when it comes to transportation. The pain is going to be horrible when it comes to Medicaid. The horror stories that you've heard about Child Protective Services is going to get worse. This dog doesn't hunt. Now, so what we have to do, and we can't have an income tax, what we have to do is reverse 1 or 2 or 3 of those old decisions. And the one we ought to hit first is to close that property tax loophole.
Amen.
The owners of large commercial industrial properties are cheating us. And I'll say one last thing, and then I'll yield the balance of my time. This session, as in every session, legislation was proposed to close that loophole. I have spies working for me now, and they called me the other night, and they said that one of the representatives, and I'm not going to mention his name, who filed the bill to close the loophole, got a call from the Texas Association of Realtors. And they said to him, you withdraw that bill, or we're going to crush everything you touch for the rest of your political career. And he withdrew the bill because that's the way the game is played in Austin. Which means there's not going to be enough money for public education. And all this happy talk that you hear, at best, it's a one-session solution. At worst, it's not going to happen. And certainly, we are going to continue to lose speed and altitude. Therefore, we must act.
Thank you. All right, let's look at another question here. Good expertise there. We've already discussed how does Texas compare to other states. Charlie said 45%. Teacher pay, how does Texas compare to other states and countries regarding teacher pay? About 47,000?
No, about 47.
Oh, about 47. 42 to 47. And the retirement benefits, of which my wife draws some, is 50th in the country on that. Question here, is the State Board of Education asking for more money? Why or why not? And what does the State Board of Education really have to do with education in Texas? Any of you want to answer that one? I mean, they run.
The state board really doesn't advocate on dollars. I think that, but I wanted to add something, if I could, to what Mike said. Not only are we having a revenue problem, we've also increased expenditures. And there are a couple things. Now, I may step off into it, but I'm going to do it anyway. To me, the big elephant in the room is we've created a parallel system in the state of Texas that is costing billions of dollars to the taxpayer, and it's called charters.
That's exactly right.
I'm not opposed to competition. I'm not here speaking as an anti-charter. That's not my point. My point is, as a taxpayer, we're spending money into a system that's parallel to the public system, and it's called stranded cost. And so when I lose millions of dollars in my system to charters, I don't lose millions of dollars in expenditures. So it actually increases the cost of public education. And I think that's what people don't seem to understand. And what really bothers me about the charter system, and I'm not talking about the mom and pop charter here, I'm talking about these charters that are national chains.
Right.
What is happening is our dollars are actually leaving the state of Texas. So taxpayer dollars are leaving the state of Texas to actually pay for advertising and building and other things in other states. That should be outlawed immediately by the state of Texas. That should not be allowed. And again, I'm going to add another piece to this. If you look at the performance, that's where you're going to be astonished. We are paying way more into that system. We're educating about 5% of our kids in that system, and we're paying about 16% of the budget. You guys, and the performance outcomes are not better. In fact, the lowest performers tend to be charters. They like to say it's because they're kids, but if you haven't noticed lately, they don't accept discipline problems into their system.
Right.
In fact, they kick them out.
Right.
They keep them for a while in their system, and they push them back to public ed when they
Right.
have to be tested.
Right.
This is the reality of what we deal with. The other increased cost that is a waste of dollars is this accountability system we have. It is a complete waste of money. It has not improved performance one iota. I know people like to say, oh, testing helps. It does not help. The thing that probably helped the most in this whole system of testing was we finally got our eyes on the poor and minority in this country. That was an important element of it, but now it's become bastardized, excuse my French, and it's become a system unto itself. It's a money-making machine. Guys, I'm here to tell you, there are increased expenditures in this budget that if we paid attention could be removed. The other thing that wasn't mentioned by Mike that I think is key to this is $3.5 billion of recaptured money on the part of the state of Texas from local property taxes not spent on public education. So they're actually increasing dollars to the regular fund that should be spent on public ed and are not. I would encourage that we actually look at the oil and gas money that's put into that rainy day fund and start using that money to help fund the system as well. And I don't mean a one-time funding. I mean use that as investment money for that purpose.
Go ahead, Ruth.
He may not have gone there, but I am. And I cannot help it. I taught in the public schools, went to public schools. I'm a definite pro-public school advocate. But I'll tell you what, in Dallas alone, these charter schools, and like he said, we're not talking the mom and pop charters, we're talking the corporate funded charters. Some of them Uplift, and you'll see a charter school right down the street or across the street here. I'm turned around. They are all over Dallas. In Dallas alone, we have about 30,000 kids that should be in Dallas ISD that are in these charter chains that are gone. What the state has done in Dallas alone, every child that's in public school that goes to a charter school takes $1,895 with them per child. Dallas ISD spends about $9,900 per student. So now we have a commissioner of education that came out of Dallas, off of the Dallas ISD school board, that is trying to push these charter schools, and he's done something in Senate Bill 1882 last session that causes these partnerships. They want public school districts to partner with charter chains so that they get that additional money. And because our public schools have been just depleted of money, drained of the double educational system that our state is funding, they're jumping on it. It is unproven. It hasn't even been in existence for a year, and all these districts are creating these partnerships so they can get money to try to take care of their students in their districts. It is a horrible push. We have been set up for years to become failures as public schools so that they can push their agenda of you should have charter schools or private schools. And what happens in these charter schools, they're not accountable to anyone. Their board is not elected, they're appointed. They don't have to disclose who their investing partners are. We have legislation being put in this year to try to get more transparency. We don't have a level playing field, and they go after large urban school districts where our black and brown children and our minority children are being extremely cheated out of the education they deserve. So I'm going there because we have got to support these public people that are for our public schools, that will give the right back to people that can do the job and not have people vote in the name of a party. They vote against their own interests, and they don't even pay attention to how it's going to affect them. But when they look at the future of our cities, our states, our country, the leaders that are going to come out, don't get me wrong, we have some phenomenal students that are in our schools. But the ones that are being cheated from these charter schools, don't listen to their hype, because if you look at the research, they are not telling you the truth. And they can twist the numbers because they're data crunchers.
Go ahead, Troy. Go ahead, Troy.
We've already hit on school finance. We've hit on charter schools. We've hit on accountability. We're not going to get into it, but testing is a part of this as well. Do you see the network that's been laid against public schools with this? I want you to understand how deeply seated this is and how hard of a fight is ahead. What we're talking about, folks, is a culture. We're not just talking about a single issue. We're not talking about a small group of politicians with a small base. We're talking about a culture that insists on looking at public education as a business model. Children are not a product, and education is not a business model. Let me tell you what a business model gets you. A business model gets you a system with a test where third graders sit and throw up and cry on test day. I've been an elementary principal. I've cleaned it up. A business model gets you a higher dropout rate. It gets you lower attendance rates. A business model gets you higher teen suicide. And it also gets you, and I'm going to go there on this, it gets you school shooters. We didn't have the problem of violence in our hallways when I was a kid. Something has changed, and what has changed is we've decided that public education is a business and students are a product. That's what's doing it. And when a child is told from the third grade on, you failed the test, you are a failure, your teachers are a failure, everyone around you is college and career ready, you will be a leech on society, you do not measure up, we then are surprised when someone breaks by the time they get to high school. We have to change the culture and change the model altogether. And the only way that's done is through you finding people to go with you into the voting booth and putting these people in the street.
Thank you, Troy.
Chris, we're coming to you, but one sentence, Democrats, one sentence. It's the Democrats that are heading the way on the charters all over the country, and I know that's a mic drop statement, but the Democrats are the ones that are pushing this. In Dallas, in Houston, Bill Gates is the biggest charter privatizer in this country. Go do the research and go hold your party accountable. And what Troy's talking about in the culture change starts right across the street, right there. And your school board, because these, as everybody has said, as Rena said, are enormously rich, powerful interests. And as Troy said, wanting to make commodities out of our kids and markets out of our classrooms, it's a sin and it needs to stop right now.
Thank you, Charlie, and all of you that spoke. Now, you get to vouchers, and the issue with vouchers is that it does take money right out of the public school, and so does charters. And you take our rural schools, where I'm from, and you take 20 students out of a 2A school or a 3A school. That's $100,000, the way I understand it. And just what the superintendent was talking about a while ago, that means you don't cut a bus route. You don't cut a teacher, because you didn't lose them all out of the sophomore class or all out of the third grade. You lost them 1 through 12. So you can't let a single teacher go. You can't cut a bus route. You can't close down a classroom. Well, we're 20 students less, so we don't have to heat and cool this one. All your expenses stay the same. All of them stay the same. You just get money for 20 less kids because they went to a charter school or they went to a private school. Anytime you open a new school, it raises those expenditures. So vouchers are a horrendous idea besides violating, and I just need y'all to say, if you ever hear me speak, you will always hear me say this. The greatest thing ever done by the government in the history of the world is the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. Nobody ever did that till we said, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That's why we don't shoot each other in this country yet. It is the greatest thing ever done, is religious liberty, the separation of church and state. And vouchers and all these things violate that, because when you take my tax dollars and give it to someone for religious purposes, you have violated that First Amendment to the Constitution. And we have a large group of people in this country literally trying to destroy it, calling themselves constitutionalists. I'm sorry, Ted Cruz, you can't be a constitutionalist if you don't believe in the First Amendment to the Constitution. Okay, it's just not there. Now, there are a whole lot of other people that don't believe in the First Amendment to the Constitution, and Chris Tackett's going to tell us about those. So I'm going to go to you right now, Chris.
All right.
And there's your intro. And I've seen this presentation. It's very, very good.
Well, let me touch on one or two things before I go there, right? We just talked about the STAR test. And if you guys have looked at some of the articles that have come out lately, where they talk about that third grader, right, who's punished, right? The idea that the readability metrics that go along, the Lexile standards that say, hey, what grade level is this really, right? So when you're doing the reading portions of the STAR test, professionals, right, who measure these things have absolutely looked and seen that the third grade test has questions that are 2 grade levels higher, right? So the targets where we say what's acceptable, we're saying kids that are at an acceptable level, they're the ones who are actually reading well above grade level as they're going through and doing these things. We've got all these kids that are being told they're failures. And they're reading and functioning exactly at the level they're supposed to. And don't think it's just the reading tests, right? Because on those math tests, they're full of word problems, right? We've all had those word problems where it's, you know, somebody bought so many of this thing and trains are moving back and forth between cities, right? We've all stumbled into those, but realistically, that's the same kind of language being leveraged. So when kids who are functioning at the right level are being told they're failures, have to go in and take this test over and over, have to go in on summers and get extra help to do things, when realistically they're exactly where they're supposed to be. And you wonder, why is this being done, right? Why would we set a test that's 2 grade levels too high and tell everybody, oh no, it's the right one? It circles back to some of what we've been touching on, is this idea of trying to set our public schools and the kids in our public schools up for failure. If we can go through and say, hey, the public schools are failing, now we have a platform to stand on to say we want vouchers. We want even more charter schools. If you think back to the 85th session of the Texas legislature, we had all kinds of voucher things going on. We had all these legislators standing on the steps of the Capitol wearing yellow scarves, those school choice scarves. And they'll call it school choice. They'll say it's vouchers, it's education savings accounts, it's tax-free or tax credits for businesses for doing scholarships to private schools, right? And again, it's all money that should be going into a public school that's going into a private institution. There's all these different ways to disguise it, but it's exactly the same thing. The people who are behind that push in Texas, who are behind Dan Patrick, who are behind the Freedom Caucus in the Texas House, it's Empower Texans. That's a group, well, and again, Empower Texans, if you don't know them, I can tell you lots and lots about Empower Texans. They position themselves as a grassroots organization that's here for transparency in government, and small government is good, all these kinds of things. And again, they will tell you they have thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands. It's this army of people across the state who are supporting them. And when you start to look at the numbers in their PAC, right, which is their big thing where they give lots and lots of money to multiple candidates, this last election cycle, they took in $5.8 million. And on the surface, you're thinking, wow, $5.8 million, that's incredible, right? That's a lot of money that they're spending on this. And it must be all these people behind it, right? They're grassroots, they have all this support. Well, the reality is 9 people gave 96.8% of that money. 9 people. 1 person gave 3.2 of that. And that's Tim Dunn, who's from out in Midland, who happens to own private schools, right? He's on the board for private schools and for a whole lot of other boards as well. But these people are basically buying into legislators. If we have time, I'll show you pie charts, because I've got pie charts. Okay. But you can look, Empower Texans in the Texas House this last cycle funded 42 candidates, right, that were their endorsed candidates. For Empower Texans, and again, it's basically a shadow organization. Those 9 people are also creating all these other PACs who are also giving directly to candidates. There's this whole little network that's out there. They put $8.7 million into these 42 candidates. Well, they won 15 times, but they lost all the rest of them. But when you think about those extreme things that are happening in our legislature now, right? You think about as it relates to public schools, as it relates to some horrible bills that I won't touch on because they're not public education or property tax related. These are the people who are absolutely behind it, right? The groups who are behind it are, well, the way I like to describe Empower Texans and their philosophy is we want no government in our lives because it makes we, the mega donors behind Empower Texans, more money and gives us more power. And there's an asterisk on that, right? We want no government involvement in those lives. And the asterisk is unless it's to impose our religion, their particular brand of religion, and it's not the broad religion. It is a very specific Christian nationalist, dominionist religion. Very different thing. That's what they're trying to impose. And that's where putting religion, trying to cross that line into our schools, into our government sets, that is absolutely the agenda. That's what they're after. Mike Lang, who is the chairman of the Freedom Caucus, who is my representative in House District 60, has filed a bill this session to allow schools, instead of having counselors, can hire chaplains instead. I mean, right. I mean, that's the right response, so thank you for that. But those are the kinds of things they are trying to do to blur the lines in between church and state. And the idea is we're going to push everything we can from a religion standpoint into our public schools. And absent that, the goal is to break the public school system. Right? So whatever's there, we're going to inject the religion in. And if we can't, it's break it. And these folks are the ones behind Dan Patrick. They're behind Ken Paxton. They're behind multiple members in our Senate. And they're behind a whole bunch of people in the House. That's the idea. Those are the folks who are absolutely trying to tear down public education. And I'll show you some, I am part of a group called Project Educo. It's some very like-minded, public school-focused people. We've got a website that actually just went live with our scorecards, so that's really good. What we did is we went back to the 85th session of the Texas legislature and looked at everything, and we couldn't find a scorecard that spoke to public ed, right? How are people voting for public education bills? Giving more money to public schools, paying our teachers more, making sure retirees are taken care of as we go forward, right? Those are all things that matter because the whole public school system is one big entity that is so important to our state. And we couldn't find a scorecard. There's scorecards for everything else, but there wasn't one for public ed. So we created one. And I'll be able to show you, for the 85th session, we had lots of great Democrats, lots of great Republicans who absolutely, on every one of those votes, came through for public education. And then there's a whole nother group, all Republicans and Republicans in name only, which is the Freedom Caucus, those Empower folks, because they're not really Republicans, they're radical libertarians with that Christian nationalist agenda, right? So the real rhinos, because they like to call, what they would call moderate Republicans rhinos, it's absolutely these folks. I can show you they don't support public education. We're starting the scorecard for the 86th session. There's only been a couple of bills to look at. There's noise being made that they're behind public education, but I don't buy it. And we're going to prove it as we go through this session. Okay, I probably just talked long enough.
Chris, I wanted to touch on the testing piece because I think it's really important. Mesquite ISD, actually, the New York Times came to our district. If you saw the article in the New York Times to report on that piece, and I'm part of a group of superintendents, the Texas School Alliance, which has really been pushing Commissioner Morath on this issue quite a bit. It's not just third grade. It's every grade level is up to 2 grade levels higher in the readability levels of those tests. And the research being done in math is worse. It's deeply concerning what is happening in math. But this is the piece I wanted to point out. There are some kids, and I've worked in the island ISDs of the world. I've had a lot of experience, a lot of different places. There are some kids, when they wake up in the morning, they're going to do fine. They're absolutely going to do fine. But when you look at children who come from poverty, and to me this is the issue, children who come from poverty typically approach our schools having 2 years of recovery needed to get on grade level as a 5-year-old. As a 5-year-old. Our schools are doing a miraculous job of getting these kids on grade level. They really are. It's phenomenal the work that our teachers are doing. And that's just, the reason that happens in poverty is simply access to experiences, access to literature. And often those parents are working 2 jobs to make ends meet. They aren't around their children as much. That's why in Mesquite we have our Read, Play, Talk initiative to get parents to engage in read, play, and talk every single day with their children. And businesses are taking that on as an initiative as well. But here's the bottom line. These children are struggling to get on grade level. Our teachers are working significant hours and putting in a lot of emotion to getting these children on grade level, and then they take these tests. Tests we know that are designed, according to our commissioner, to be predictive of college readiness on an 8-year-old. Now that makes me angry. And they're making me test 3-year-olds, if y'all didn't know that. That's an abomination.
Right.
It is wrong. And so we're doing this injustice to our children, and then when they aren't successful on the test, what we're communicating is they aren't successful students. Doing that to a child from poverty is significant harm. And how do I know this? Because I'm one of those kids. I grew up in foster care. I know what this looks like. I know what seeing children struggle through life looks like. They need the support and love of education, not the denigration of a test to tell them they're no good. Guys, I am all for accountability. I just want to say this. Public schools should be accountable. We have a responsibility, and we did, in the words of George Bush, we did practice a soft piece of bigotry in our schools. We did. I saw it. And that's why I was kind of supportive when this whole system started, of raising our awareness of our poor kids, our minority children. But what we've seen is just reprehensible, the approach to this. And as I like to tell people, when you're digging a hole, and our commissioner has as much said we're digging a hole, then stop doing the things that are causing you to dig deeper. Get out of the hole and start something different. That's what logic should cause you to do. My frustration with the system is what it's communicating to our children, and it's doing it in the name of big business. And it's not just the political lobbyist. It's the Pearsons of the world.
Right.
They're making a boatload of money. And if you don't think these representatives who've been working in our Senate and our House don't leave and go work for these guys and make big bucks, let me tell you, I've been in meetings where the New Orleans charter head has been brought into the meeting as a solution to Texas. Now, no disrespect to anyone. I went to school in Louisiana. I'm an Iowa boy. But I cannot believe we're actually reaching out to New Orleans for advice in how to educate kids in Texas.
And one of our state senators was one of probably the first ones. But on this testing, let me say also, not only is it labeling our children and our public schools as failures, it has brought a competitive piece to our educators. Education is a collaborative effort. We work together, not only as teachers and support staff, to work with our kids, but to bring the parents in and the businesses in. This competition that they have created is running our true educators out of the profession to where they don't want to be a part of it anymore. They can't be a part of it anymore. And what this movement has done is brought unprepared, uncertified people into our classrooms that really don't know how to help our kids, especially in our large urban and suburban districts. And not only have they done that, now they are tying these test scores to the compensation of our teachers. In Dallas ISD, for the last 4 to 5 years, if your experience as an educator, you get no credit for whatsoever under the evaluation system. If you have a master's or a doctorate degree or you're nationally board certified, you get no incentive whatsoever. They're not recognized at all because of the evaluation system, and it's only in Dallas. That's the only district in the state of Texas that is using this. And about 50% of our teachers in Dallas ISD since 2014 have 0 to 2 to 3 years of teaching experience because they can pay them less, they don't ask questions, they're still learning, and they won't push back. So they just do whatever they're told. Competition, oh yeah. I won't share anything with you because you're going to get a better score than I do. And you're going to get more money than I do. So the competition has really put a burden on our educators, and our children are the ones that are feeling the true consequences of all of that.
But I heard that there was a third-year teacher who's making $90,000 in Dallas ISD. I heard that. I heard it right from the governor's mouth. I saw it.
I promise you, he lied.
All right, Mike, and then I do want to get to Chris for at least 15 minutes on Empower Texans. Go, Mike.
Yeah, I actually just wanted to share some good news in all this doom and gloom. I must be crazy to run 2 statewide campaigns, and the subject has always been and always will be public education. But when you do that, put yourself through that, which, by the way, it's a wonderful experience. You discover something that's really, really important and really, really powerful, which is the vast majority of Texans, Democrats and Republicans alike, feel this way about public education. I see it all the time. Not to brag about my performance, because I'm not lieutenant governor, but if you look at which Democrat did the best in the state, county by county, yours truly did better than Beto. And don't worry, I ain't no Beto. I ain't even no Kim Olson. But the point is that it was public education that did it. It was public education that did it. Can't hear me? Is that better? It was public education that did it. And I want to share one story from the campaign trail, which had to have been the highlight of the whole thing. We were out in West Texas, and we were driving from Amarillo. We didn't think there were a lot of votes out there for us, but you can't ignore anybody, and it's nice out there. So we made our second trip, but we hadn't spent any money, really. Didn't expect anybody out there to know who I was, David. We were driving from Amarillo to Midland. No, Amarillo to Lubbock, and there's a place called Tulia. It's about halfway. You ever been? Tulia? Not known for its Democrats. And we stopped, and I got a sandwich while the guys were filling up the Jeep. And so when I left the sandwich shop to get in the Jeep, a good old boy drove up to me in his pickup truck. And he rolled his window down, and he said, "Hey, are you Mike Collier?" That's the way they talk out there. I said, "I am." "Well, I hope you beat that son of a..." And then he rolled up his window and he drove off, and he had on his bumper sticker, he had Tulia ISD. So the vast majority of Texans feel the way we do about public education, and that's the good news. And I want to share one other story. I was speaking with a superintendent, I don't recall who it was. This was after the election, when the legislature was talking about putting more money into public education. I mean, it really changed the dialogue for as long as it lasts. And they said to Dan Patrick, "All right, we come see you every year to tell you what we want, and you've always treated us so horribly, and now all of a sudden you're treating us beautifully. What's changed, Governor?" And he said, "It's simple." This is what he said. He said, "Teachers used to vote about 15%. This last election cycle, they voted 58%. I'm a politician, guys. So that's what we have to do. That's the work that we're in. And when you think about the issues that we face as a state, there are several, and they're all important, but none is more important than public education, and we just have to stay on it. And the good news is, if we stay on it, we will prevail. And what we should aspire to is the best public education system in the nation. Let other states learn from us. And if I could just say one last thing, then I promise not to grab the microphone again. I do a lot of campaigning in the company of Republicans. In my professional life, I'm surrounded by Republicans. I used to be a Republican. And I love having this conversation. And I often hear, "Oh, Mike, you Democrats, all you ever want to do is throw money at a problem and it makes you feel better." No, sorry. And here's how I push back. And I say, what if we only did 3 things? Smaller class sizes so our teachers can actually get the job done. Oh, no, that makes sense to me. Special education teachers so that you got the right person at the right time at the right place. Yeah, that makes sense to me. And an excellent pre-K system. Now, what if we only did those 3 things and nothing else? What do you think would happen? Well, our performance in public education would be off the charts good. So if you find yourself in a conversation with a Republican, share that with them. Anyway, thank you for letting me say that.
Okay. Charlie Johnson is demanding the microphone. I will say, just a second, Charlie. Mike Collier was the leading vote getter for Democrats in 171 counties in the state of Texas, and including Tom Green County that I'm county chair of. So the education message, and that's what I'm trying to do as chair of the non-urban rural caucus for the Democratic Party, is tell people everywhere I can go and accept every invitation I can accept, education, education, education. Yep. All of our communities in West Texas and in East Texas and all these 2A and 3A schools, the entire community revolves around the public school. Yes. Why do you keep voting for someone trying to destroy your school like Charles Perry from Lubbock, who is committed? Charles Perry's owned by Empower Texans. But that's the message we've got to get out to those folks. All right, Charlie, 3 minutes.
No, I don't need 3 minutes. Pearson is a British-owned company, so go tell all your Trump friends, make America great, and let's fire Pearson from oppressive testing of our children. And the second thing is that Dallas forces, Dave knows this is true, I won't name them because I'm a Baptist preacher. Dallas forces are wanting to tie the funding for our children's education to the STAR test. It's business. Call Nathan Johnson. Call Beverly Powell. Call Bob Hall. Give him an earful. And tell him this is wrong. And we're not going to let you do it. Then call the mayor. Then call the Dallas Chamber. Okay? Then call your realtor and your business leader and say what David has just said. Now, y'all, Democrats who believe in the common good, some of our leading presidential Democratic candidates are pro-charter school. Beto O'Rourke, his wife started a charter school in El Paso. I'm just laying the dead cat out on the table. Cory Booker, big charter proponent with Betsy DeVos. Now, y'all, let me tell you, I know it's not liberal enough and I know it's not sexy enough public education for the Democratic Party. David just gave us the keynote. And we need to work among Republicans and Democrats in such a way that public schools are no longer a wedge issue in American political life.
Thank you, Charlie. Chris, you want to rock and roll a little bit on Empower Texans?
Sure.
Okay.
Let me. You guys talk, and I'll make sure I'll get the projector
We'll talk.
turned on.
I'll give you two quotes while he's getting the projector set that you can use somewhere. If you're in religious circles, I would remind you that meanness is not a fruit of the Spirit. If you'd like to read Galatians 5, you won't find it there. You'll find love, peace, and joy, but you won't find meanness. The religious right believes meanness is a fruit of the Spirit. And that one is not a good one to have. And I had a second one, and I can't remember what it was now, since I'm older than I used to be. So, in the meantime, I think Troy has something to say, even if he doesn't know it, so I'm going to kick it to him for a few minutes.
I'll say two real quick things and buy him a little bit of time. First off, I want to challenge you to something. But first off, if you don't know, I'm one of the dirty old conservatives sitting up at the front. You noticed I didn't say Republican. I'm a homeless conservative is what I am. What color is my shirt? You want to know where real power is? Charlie already hit on it. If you've looked at the flyers on your tables about our group, Texans for Public Education, we're nonpartisan. We chose purple for our color because it is the perfect combination of red and blue. You want real power? Put the two colors together. We are Americans and we are Texans and we have more in common with one another than we do apart, and we cannot allow a letter behind someone's name to cause us to cast a precious vote that my son is out serving right now to protect. The other thing I want to do, I know there are staffers and senators watching this, or they will watch this, they will be briefed on this after it's over, and I want to throw a challenge out to them. And I'm going to call out a name. I watched Mike Morath's confirmation hearing. I watched him mislead Kel Seliger and the other members of that nomination committee with answer after answer after answer. And what he did was, when asked at least a dozen times during that interview, what do you do during the design process of the test to check the readability of each question and each passage? His answer was, we bring in grade level teachers to look at every question. Now, I know something that he knows. That sounds like they're checking it. There are 3 ways to check the grade level of a question. You can check content. Teachers are qualified to do that. You can check depth of knowledge needed to answer the question. Teachers are qualified to do that. Or you can check readability. There is an equation for readability. It's an algorithm. Teachers are not trained. There is not one certification program in this state that teaches a teacher to look at a piece of writing and say, here's the lexile for this piece of writing. We depend upon tables from vendors for that. He did not directly lie, but he purposefully misled that committee. To the senators in our state, if you want to show that you're willing to stand up for public education and for truthfulness, put a no vote on the confirmation of the man who misled you in your confirmation hearing.
Okay, thank you, Troy. You got something real quick, Mike?
I just want to say one thing about testing, because I don't want this event to come and go without me saying something about testing, which I think is a disaster. First of all, we all know, if you talk to teachers and students and parents, how awful testing is. But I also talk to college professors and I talk to employers. And what they're telling me is that critical thinking skills are dropping like a rock. And if you think about the kinds of jobs that we're going to be creating in Texas in the next 5, 10, 15 years, if we don't have critical thinking skills and STEM skills, we're doomed. And I think testing is a big part of the problem. I think we should get rid of testing completely. There are other ways to measure. There are other ways to measure, and I'm for measuring. I'm an accountant. I like to say, I'll go measure something tonight just so that I can sleep well. But that's the wrong way to measure, and it's destroying critical thinking skills, and our state is doomed if we don't take a different path.
Thank you. Yeah, those tests, where I grew up in a town of 200 with a high school class, graduating class of 5, the important thing was to be able to read. I read all the way to the ranch every afternoon after school. And so I think that's still the most important thing. We've got to start that pre-K. I was going to do fine educationally, went to a PhD because I could read. And I was stressed reading. And that's the only thing that might be tested is, can we read? And can we improve reading? And that's the only thing I think is there. I remember my last quote. I'll give it to you and turn it over to Chris. It's a horrible thing to be a good moral person and not know how to love. Figure that one somewhere. Okay, Chris.
All right.
You got it?
I got this.
Okay.
I got the mic even around my neck so I can navigate at the same time. So what I wanted to show you guys first is, I told you, and my placard even says it, I'm with a group called Project Educo, right? It's 5 of us who are passionate about public ed who started putting together a scorecard. This is the summary of the House in the 85th session. Overall, on our scorecard, on a 1 to 100 scale, right, the House scored a 79 in the 85th session. And it's because of a whole mix of Republicans and Democrats who voted for 14 key bills and amendments as we went through that session. So the way the scorecard is set up, I've got 20 people who all got 100. And as I keep going through, the second 40 all got 100. Again, a mix of Democrats and Republicans. The third group of 20, again, mix of Democrats and Republicans, still all supporting public education, right? That's fabulous. We keep going down. It's only on the 4th page do I get people that are still an A, right? An A is pretty good. On most of those bills, they're going with it. Now we get into the 80 through 100, 81 through 100. And the Speaker of the House got a B. He got an 80, right? But again, we're still passing. We're still in good shape. And then when you jump down here from 101 through 120, it's all Republicans. We got a handful on here that were, as my son, who's a freshman at Texas State, tries to keep reminding me that C's get degrees. We got some C's, but very quickly we get into some failures, right? We got people who are more often than not, right, not supporting public education. Either it's voting for vouchers, it's not supporting retirees, it's all those kind of things, right? And then the bills go across the board. Now, notice they're all Republicans, and then we jump to 120 through 140, and this is where I change the way we operate. Remember I talked about the rhinos, right? The Republicans in name only, those members of the Freedom Caucus, those who are the deepest with Empower Texans. The best one at 127 was Jeff Leach. He got a 40 on the public education score. And I believe, this is Chris's opinion, had such a close election, had public education show up big time in 2018, decided he couldn't stay in the Freedom Caucus anymore. He's left the Freedom Caucus. He still votes very conservatively, but he's no longer associating with them. Jeff Leach, number 127, represents House District 67. Right, that's a calculated move. He knows public education, public educators, those who support public education, are going to show up and empower Texans as it relates to public education's a bad word. So he cleared himself there. Now as you go...
Meyer is his district.
Do what?
This is Morgan Meyer's district.
This is Morgan Meyer. He's number 131. He got a 37. 37? That's not so good. And he's not even a Freedom Caucus person. He is. And he got a 37 score last session. And as you go down this list, we've got Matt Rinaldi, who got knocked out this last go-round, right at 137. Julie Johnson took that one. So we're down to 140, right? I got people at 22, but there's still 6 legislators left that we scored. Let's make sure we call them out. They're all Freedom Caucus members. We got my representative from House District 60, Mike Lang, 17%. Jonathan Stickland at 17% from House District 92. And the worst public education score is Briscoe Kane from House District 128. 13%. He only earned 4 points on our scale, right? But the thing I want to point out is, as we talk about this session, right, the 86th session, House Bill 3 went through. House voted on it. The vote was 148-1, voting for House Bill 3. And it's easy to say, let's look at Jonathan Stickland and make fun of him for being the only one who voted against it. And I did, right? I absolutely did. But the other thing I want you to think about, look at this list of where those Freedom Caucus members fall for public education. So there's this group. Let me back it up. And again, remember, these are the folks, and Mays Middleton is one who got elected this go-round, who is now part of the Freedom Caucus. So they have 11 members today. But 10 of them voted for House Bill 3. And I look at this, and it's like, these people don't support public education. What's happening? If you listened to an interview that Dennis Bonin did this last week, he talked about Empower Texans and stirring the pot and, trying to mobilize people to fight against themselves. He made the statement, they told him to vote no. So Empower Texans told him to vote no. And that's pretty typical with the way they handle their legislators. If they told Jonathan Stickland to vote no, it only stands to reason they told some of those others to vote yes. Why? They know the public education supporters will mobilize big time this next election cycle. As we look at 2020, we're all going to show up and be supporting people who support public education. So if I've got a handful of Freedom Caucus members who can raise their flag and say, but I voted for House Bill 3, they put a tiny seed of doubt in people's minds. Empowered Texans railed against House Bill 3, said it's horrible. Yet all of their legislators voted for it, except one. These people are playing a long game. They want to be able to convince the Republicans in their district that these folks will buck Empowered Texans. They'll think for themselves, because the reputation these legislators have today is not to do that. So the propaganda they're putting out there is these people are now for public ed. I can show you where they were a session ago. A tiger does not change its stripes. They are playing a long game, folks. Don't buy into it. The money behind these legislators is not changing. The Republican Party of Texas just named Stacey Hawk to lead their Victory 2020 committee. Stacey Hawk gave $150,000 to Greg Abbott, gave $75,000 to the Republican Party, and gave a whole bunch of money to Freedom Caucus, Empowered Texans-backed legislators. We haven't heard talk about vouchers this session. There's a reason, because we showed up as public education this time.
Chris, just FYI, Schaefer attached a voucher amendment yesterday afternoon late. So it's going to be come before committee on Monday.
So there we have it, right? Again, I just told you a tiger doesn't change their stripes. They want to use House Bill 3 to be able to hold something up, to say we push back against Empowered Texans, we are our own legislators. It's not real, folks. Pay attention. The numbers are there, and as we go through the rest of this session, you can go to our website, because we're going to be updating the bills for the 86th. We're going to be keeping up with the scores as we go through it. We're going to be updating these things every week. Hey, as we've got new bills that get voted on, and it's only votes by the full House or the full Senate. Committee votes don't matter, because that's not what makes it law. The person who sponsors a bill doesn't get extra credit. The person who is out there speaking to the public saying, I support public education, it doesn't matter. It's how you vote. And that's what drives this. And these people with Empowered Texans, who are backed by Empowered Texans, do not support public ed, period, end of story. You want more Empowered Texans? I can keep going.
I want to see the chart.
You want the pie charts?
I want to think about Don and them, etc.
Pie charts. Here we go. Oop, hold on, let's get to the pack. So this is my website, christackettnow.com. If you want to dig into it, you can hit it whenever you want. We'll give it just a minute. It's slaving off my phone. I'll tell you what. Oop. The joy of live data. So I've got all these packs that I could show you, but here's the important one. This is the Empowered Texans pack for the last election cycle. This is from January 1, 2017 through December 31st, 2018, so 2 years. $5.8 million went into that pack. 512 donations, 261 donors. And again, this is from this group that's so grassroots. They have thousands and thousands of people. They have 261. Okay, I'm going to stand up because that's how I do this. So, when you look at my website, every one of these pie charts has 10 slices. The biggest is always the top donor, and then it gets smaller from there. The 10th slice in every pie chart, and anything you go look at on my site, it's everybody else. So you can very quickly see this all the way to here is 96.8% of the pie. 3.2% is everybody else. So everybody else only gave $186,000. The rest of 5.8 million came from 9 people. 3.2 million came from Tim Dunn. And then we've got Ferris Wilkes with $985,000. Dan Wilkes, who's his brother, right, gave $625,000. Kyle Stallings, who's buddies with Tim Dunn, $378,000. Mace Middleton, who spent $1.7 million of his own dollars to buy a House seat this last cycle, and he won $1.7 million to get a seat that you get paid $600 a month for, right? It's kind of crazy. Doesn't make a ton of sense. But that's the reality of what's going on with Empowered Texans. Now, I want you to notice these names: Dunn, Wilkes, Stallings. I'm going to show you another pack at the same time just to show you how twisted this stuff is. Oh, this is a good one. Fine, I'll do Texans for Fiscal Responsibility. Okay, this is another Empower Texans pack. That's their pie. They took in $627,000, and $600,000 was Ferris Wilkes. And I'll show you one more. Texas Right to Life is another one that puts a ton of materials out as we go into election season. 3.1 million in the last election cycle. But look at the names: Ferris Wilkes, Dan Wilkes, Holloway Frost, Kyle Stallings, Tim Dunn, Dick Salisbury, Darlene Pendry. It's all the same people behind these packs. So what they're doing is they're giving money directly to candidates, a lot in some cases. They're pouring money into PACs. And then as we hit election season, your mailbox gets inundated with all of these things from all of these different people. And if you're that person who's not politically astute, right, you're not that one who pays attention all the time, you look at that and you think, well, geez, there's all these people who support this person. Maybe I should pay attention to them. And the reality is, all of these mailers, all of these different things that are coming out are coming from the same people. It's 9 people who are doing all of this with this group of Freedom Caucus folks. It is absolutely insidious. And what they're doing is trying to, in Texas, you can give as much money as you want. You can give unlimited funds as an individual or a PAC. So why would I do this and not just give all that money to the candidate directly? It's because their goal is propaganda, right? The idea is to take one voice, or 9 voices with lots and lots of money, and turn it into this false chorus. If I can convince people there's all these other things out there, all these other groups that are supporting a candidate who is anti-public school, who is anti-government generally, I can convince folks to vote for them. It's scary, scary stuff, folks. They are trying to buy our state and tear down our schools. And the only way we stop it is making sure people understand what's happening. We talk to them about what's going on and the great things everybody here has said. Share that information with them and make sure we vote. Because none of this is going to change without new people in Austin.
Thank you, Chris. Very good. All right, folks, we want to open it up for Q&A, and what I'm going to ask you to do is stand up, ask a question. I'll try to repeat it, and then we'll see who wants to answer it. So, go.
My question is this. We have an organization that is recommending that educators cross over and vote in a Republican primary to, quote, vote for the lesser of two evils rather than support a strong Democratic pro-education candidate and get them the name recognition that they deserve as being already on the ticket for pro-education. And I'd like to understand why this happened in especially suburban districts, not so much in urban, but suburban districts, because I don't think a vote for Cindy Burkett against Bob Hall was as smart as a vote for Kendall Scudder.
Right. I may be the only one to respond to that since I'm on the State Democrat Executive Committee. Like in my part of the world, Charles Perry is the senator. I would love to run against Charles Perry. I have no hope of beating him. None whatsoever. It is a plus 35% Republican district. I still don't think we ought to encourage people to cross over, but I'm hoping someone in the Republican primary that's like Drew Darby, my state rep, and very pro-education, will run against him, because a Democrat can't beat him. And that may be in some races they're looking at that. But I would not be for encouraging people to cross over personally in that regard.
But I need to address that, though. That's us.
It's not a contested primary.
Exactly.
Democrats go cross over.
It's not
and in
contested.
fact, we did vote for Scudder in the general election. What we're talking about is if you have an uncontested Democrat who's friendly in the Democratic primary, and you have a neutral or friendly Republican in the Republican primary against an unfriendly, go ahead, because the Democrat's going to be in the general. Go ahead, cross over, make the vote, and get rid of the worst of the choices. And then we did vote for Scudder in the general.
Yes. I understand that that is what was recommended, and I don't want to focus on one candidate, but I do want to focus on the fact that I, as a Democratic precinct chair, now have the trouble of discernment about picking through which Republican primary candidates are actually Democrats that I should be talking to and encouraging to turn out in the general election when they voted in a Republican primary in this age of Trump.
Well, that is an issue. Yes, sir.
I am a Senate District 2 resident. I gave to Kendall during the primary. He had no opponent. I wanted Bob Hall to not be my senator in Senate District 2. I campaigned for Cindy Burkett. I made a district superintendent meeting, encouraged Scott Mulder not to run in Senate 2, but to run against the worst lieutenant governor in the history of Texas. And then I voted for Kendall Scudder and gave him donations and campaigned in 4 counties. That's the time, not putting me on a pedestal, Pastor, but you were at that meeting with me and we had a conversation. That's the type of activism it will take to change this Texas Senate where we can make the progress that Troy and Mike and Pastor Johnson and all of these people need. We have to forget the party. I love that I am a conservative without a party. I am a public education supporter without a party. I just have a candidate that I will support. I cannot be a Democrat. I will attend Funky East Dallas Democrat. I campaign Walker Mike Collier in East Dallas. But I will campaign for a Republican if that is what's going to win and have a supporter for public education.
All right. Now, folks, some of this is things you're going to deal with inter-party-wise. Out of where I live, there's not a single Democrat elected official in Tom Green County. So we have thousands of Democrats that vote in the Republican primary. Is it frustrating to me? Yes, because when I'm trying to get workers, I got to go through it. But that's a part of what's going on. I want us to keep our focus on public education questions if we can. Yes, ma'am?
I'm going to stand up. My name is Casey Strange. I teach special education in Dallas County.
Thank you, Casey.
And I don't even know if it's a question, but every time we come to one, I hear about STAR testing being ridiculous for gen ed. This last 2 weeks, I've administered STAR to kids with IQs in the 40s. And my co-teacher administered STAR to kids who have to use eye gaze to answer questions. If you want to know what that's like, you pick up pieces of paper and you're like, which one are they going to? That's ridiculous. Like, My kids are the best, and they should not be put to this test, and y'all do not think anything about that.
Well, actually,
Wonderful.
I'd like to address that. I'd
Let
like to address that
superintendent address
actually,
that.
because I was in a meeting with a few of my principals Thursday, and as I'm sitting in the meeting, and this is not about accountability, y'all. What she's talking about, it's not about the accountability formula. It's not about whether or not this kid gives us a certain point or whatnot. This really is personal, and you just heard it. It's very personal. We picked up a young lady, I won't say from where, but we picked up a young lady from one of our neighboring districts just a couple weeks ago at one of our elementary schools. 4th grader. She walks in and she has some issues. She walks in and we have these triangle desks. And she could only describe those triangle desks put together as sandwiches. 4th grader. She's describing these as sandwiches. And we made her take a test. That's what she's talking about. That's what's awful. We're telling the 3-year-old example I gave earlier, we got in a tizzy with TEA on this last year. You may have seen that I was quoted in the news on this. A 3-year-old has to identify on a flashcard a wrench, or it's wrong. Now, that's ridiculous. I got adults who don't know what a wrench is, much less a 3-year-old. That's ridiculous, and this is what happens in testing. And then what are we communicating to that child, and what are we communicating? This is my point, not so much just special ed, but to children who have already started behind. Education is a unique field. It's a developmental field. Every child doesn't develop the same. When I was in 7th grade and 8th grade, I've always been a basketball player. In 7th and 8th grade, I was a point guard. I learned a lot of people don't know what that means. That means I brought the ball up the court. I was the short guy on the court. I was like 5'5". In 9th grade, I grew 6 inches, and I grew a few more inches in 10th grade, and I continued to grow till I'm now over 6'4". I developed uniquely. Minds do exactly the same thing. They develop uniquely. It is the art of educating children that we need to be focused on. We need to be able to measure where a child is, but not against a standardized outcome, but against the uniquenesses and the wonderful attributes of that individual child. And what really saddens me is today we can do it, and we're still stuck in standardization.
Right.
A process that developed remarkably in 1893.
Right.
We're the only institution still essentially doing exactly the same thing we did 150 years ago. We've got to change the way we do it instead of doubling down on the way we've done it. We've actually got to change, and that to me is important. That's why testing is a problem. It's doubling down on standardized outcomes in a world that doesn't even value standardization anymore.
Thank you. Right, question here.
Before you ask your question, let me just say I'm so in tune to that. What is happening in our public education and education because of the push for college readiness, and so many of our kids are not going to be college ready. We have gotten away from what is developmentally appropriate for our children in our schools. They are pushing these children way before they're ready. When I was in school, and I'm going to tell my age, you'll know it by this, they didn't have kindergarten back then. Even today, kindergarten is not required for public schools. So if a 5-year-old doesn't go to school, that's okay. But they are so far behind when they go into the 1st grade. Used to, kindergarten was for socialization, to be able to play with others, to work with others, to let your mind develop, experience things you didn't have. If they're not reading by the time they're out of kindergarten and writing incomplete sentences, they want to keep them back, and they're a failure in kindergarten. And as you heard, our 3-year-olds are doing that. Kindergarten, 3, 4, 5-year-olds are being tested because they think that's the way to do. They are pushing these children. We're seeing more and more behavior issues, people that are dropping out because this push for standardized testing is making billions of dollars for these people, but it's destroying our children and who they could be. Until we stand up, it's going to continue.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
So my name is Tom Irvin. Rena, thanks for asking a helpful question. So I have had a lot of conversations with people who are having their kids opt out of the test, which is an option. So I want to ask you, why can't you encourage your teachers to tell people to opt out of the test?
The question is, can you opt out of the test? I didn't know you could do that.
In Texas, you really can't. You can in some states, but in Texas, in fact, I had a wonderful parent write TEA just recently about how his child's showing up and he understands that he's going to have to take this test, but he's not going to take this test. And, and he was really offended that we had to put an S on it. Scored, but not doing so. I don't understand all the rules. But here's the thing, to your point, I think there's going to be a dearth of people start pushing opt-out. I think it's going to start happening because a lot of parents are starting to recognize the negative impact of this standardized system. And I can't encourage that. That would be inappropriate because the laws require children to take that test. But that is happening. But you're right, in some states, opt-out is actually occurring now.
Okay, I'm going to go to the back of the room first, and then over here, and then here, and that's going to shut it down. Go ahead.
Back on this gentleman's question about why do parents and educators not push back for opting out of the test. There's a couple of, I'm a high school science teacher, by the way. I had one student who had their grades that a parent said chose that option. I teach at a very small school. His right to opt out, which took a lawyer's note, counted against my scores and our school scores. And so it counts as a fail, even though the child did not take the test. And so depending on your populations and your scores, when those scores, just like this lovely panel has talked about, are tied to funding and tied to the success of the school, you want as many people to take the test as possible. And so when it's got that heavy of a weight, then you're under the gun. Do you do what's right for the kids, or do you do what's right for public education? And it's not okay. The other piece of it is, last year in October, when the kids took the PSAT, that if they scored a high enough score, they could exempt out of taking the STAR test. And then by actually performing well enough to have an exempted score on the PSAT, they were no longer counted for the STAR test as what an elite standard instead of the master's standard, which then also hurts the school's accountability rates.
What she's educating us on, folks, is if you don't take the test, it actually hurts the school district. If it's small schools, it can be even more complicated. And we're getting a rush of hands up. Thank you, ma'am. Go ahead, sir.
My name is Greg Albert, and I'm running for the Texas State Board of Education, District 14, which includes Eastland County. I'd like to ask the question, to what extent is the right-wing PAC funding State Board of Education?
Okay, this question for Chris. This gentleman's running for the State Board of Education, seat 14, District 14. And are they funding folks in the State Board of Education races? Chris, can you?
Not right now. I mean, the folks that have been supported, they're not there anymore. Now,
We swept State Board of Ed in the last election with friendly votes, and it was the teacher votes that did it.
So I used to be youth minister in Gorman years ago, and Richard Watson was one of the first people on the State Board of Education, a homeschooler.
You still got a few hostile people on there. They weren't up for election.
Okay, I had someone hand right here, I promised, and then we'll see if I can squeeze one more in. But they told me to quit. Go.
My name is Taylor Slovak. I'm a mom of a daughter. My daughter's about to be 4 years old, so we're making some big decisions coming up. I also represent District 9 on the MLK board for the City of Dallas. And I want to know, both as a parent and as someone who works in the community, outside of voting, what advice do you have for people who work in the communities this affects most? We're looking at South Dallas, and in schools where we're not getting the money, we're not getting the attention that they need. What can we do?
It's a what can we do question as an activist.
So forgetting state politics, forgetting all of that, I'm going to encourage you to, you can come even see me about this. The most important thing you can do in communities, the most important thing you can do in the life of your child and in the life of other children is read, play, talk every day. Here's the fascinating thing, and it can even be in your native language. It's that one simple thing, and it will undo all the negative impacts. It's amazing that this one simple thing can get children on grade level if we simply encourage our communities to care deeply about reading and playing and talking, and we encourage our families to care about it. We educate some of the families. Guys, I've said this to parents so many times, and this is being respectful of the fact that all of us parent essentially like we've been raised to parent. If you are not raised to read and play and talk with your children because that wasn't your experience of parenthood, of childhood, then you're probably not going to engage in that. Go and look at Chicago research, University of Chicago research on this, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. It makes a world of difference if you educate your community on this and get them engaged. And it's a positive message that requires no money. It just requires us to engage. And we have businesses all over Mesquite engaging in their own way, churches engaging in their own way, hospital engaging in their own way in read, play, talk. It's no longer a school district initiative. It's a community initiative, and that's the way it needs to be because this is about community. So that would be my encouragement to you.
Folks, we're going to wrap it real quick because we're fixing to wrap it up.
I want to add one thing to that, though. We've been pretty successful with our model. We've been in existence about 5 years. There's some debate about how many votes we moved in the last election. It's somewhere between 150,000 and 250,000 votes in the last election. In 2011, I was an rookie elementary principal, and that's when we had the layoffs. I had to lay off 15% of my staff. I wasn't emotionally prepared for that, and I had that same question, what can I do? What I came to was, I'm a teacher. There are two things I do really well. I can teach, and I can research. I would tell you, we do all kinds of things. We do what we call phone meltdowns. We've had rallies on the steps of the Capitol. We do all kinds of things. But it's all powered by the vote. The engine that drives the car is the vote. And the way that you convince people to listen and get past their partisan blinders is to be non-emotional and have the facts. Don't speak rhetorically. Do not just throw your opinion out there. Do the research so that you can refute arguments that are false with facts, just like you would a research paper. That's really the most powerful instrument you can have, is simply presenting facts and letting rational people make up their own minds based on those facts.
One other thing that I would add is volunteer in your schools. Even if you don't have children, even a smile, you may have to go through the background check and all that, but the education will come when you go and volunteer. And it doesn't have to be every day, every week, once a month. Whatever time you can give not only will be great for your student and the others, but for your educators, the classroom teachers, the support staff that work so hard, because another set of hands means somebody else gets that personal attention that they need. And before we go, I know we're wrapping up. I brought some things on the table. If you're interested in the movement of the charter schools and how they are destroying our public schools, tomorrow afternoon, my organization, Alliance AFT, is hosting a movie backpack full of cash. There's some flyers and things, I think. It is narrated by Matt Damon, but it shows you how our public schools are being destroyed by the privatization and the charter school push. You're welcome to come. There's no charge, 3 to 5 o'clock. It's in Oak Cliff at Tyler Street United Methodist Church, and we would love for you to come and be a part of that if you have the opportunity. Thank you.
I have seen that movie. It is excellent, and I would urge you to do that. Charlie Johnson is going to close us out. I would point out for one thing, I write constantly, so we're starting to put up a bunch of my articles on Turn Texas Blue, which is our rural website, which has a lot about public education and religious liberty. So Turn Texas Blue, if you go there. Charlie, I'm going to let you close it down, but I'm sure all these folks will hang around a little bit for 101 questions, okay? But Rena, come on. Hurry up, Rena.
School board elections are vital. Dallas ISD has 3 seats up every year. People will go out for general elections, all of that. If we don't get people voting for good school board people, we are losing it. I can tell you right now, $200,000 to $300,000 were spent on one school board seat in Dallas last year. $200,000 to $300,000, and it's these people that they're talking about. They're buying our school boards, and they're getting money from outside the state to get these people that will keep all of this reform going. Please educate yourself. If these PACs are, and in Dallas, the Dallas Morning News are recommending people, do your research, because more than likely they're the ones that are going to rubber stamp what is not good for our kids. Thank you.
All right, y'all, we're going to wrap this up. Kira tells me that there's food up here. Hold on, y'all, before we leave. What we're about to do right now is more important than what we've done, which is to network. I see Lori Kirkpatrick, I see Tracy Fisher, Louis Malfaro, perhaps our greatest Texas public education advocacy leader, other leaders, Dinah Miller over here. There are others of you who are active, involved. You are the ones who are changing this. Everybody together. Teachers cannot do this alone, y'all. They cannot do this alone. They have to have accountants. They have to have business leaders. They have to have superintendents. They have to have pastors like Brother Eston and Dr. Curry. Everybody together. We are moving this needle, and the privatizers know it. Our network is now in 6 other states. Guess what? They're cramming through the voucher. They're expanding the charters. They're expanding the voucher program, which has miserably failed in Florida. And they know that Texas, really Dallas, is the front lines of this battle. And everything that we've talked about is going to come right here to, it already is, Lori. It already is right here. And it's Democrats, it's the people we're voting for who are promoting this. Go hold everybody accountable. Y'all, this is a bipartisan problem. We didn't get into it overnight. We're not going to, it's a long obedience in the same direction, as a preacher once said. A long obedience in the same direction. And it's a bipartisan solution. Republicans and Democrats, go talk to your neighbor, get on social media. What Troy has demonstrated is the power of social media. Share this on social media, on your Facebook page. And I brought up everybody's Twitter. I don't think we've got time for every, are y'all on Twitter? Texans number 4E, David R. Curry 1, Pastors number 4 TX Kids. You can find all this. CJ Tackett, Collier for Texas, Dr. Vroonland, I included Kira, Becker, KCB, and Texas AFT. Texas AFT, y'all, social media is very, very important. But the most important change agent is you. Rena said it. Go talk to your teacher. Go get involved in your school. Your principal, in fact, your classroom teacher, is the base community agent for social change. So as we say in our network, go submit yourself and who you are and your authority to the authority of that classroom teacher, and we'll change this together. God bless you.